Now, William Lawrence is a professor of political science at American University. He joins us now live from Washington. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us here on TRT World. I want to begin by asking you this question that we posed in the very beginning of this news bulletin. Are these cash injections prolonging the war in Ukraine? I understand countries like the US feel they have a moral duty to help Ukraine in this time of crisis, but don't you think one of the unfavorable outcomes of these cash injections have been the prolongment of the war?
Yeah, there's no question that if you inject money and arms into a conflict, you'll prolong it as long as it doesn't bring a victory for the side that you're backing. Of course, the alternative to the prolonging this war is letting Russia win, and letting Russia win prolongs war into Europe into the coming years and even decades, since Russia takes the long view. And the idea here is if you neutralize Russia in Ukraine, you neutralize them for all of the other Eastern European targets that they seek to take over time, since the goal here is to rebuild the Russian Empire, the former Soviet area, into the glory that it had before. That's Putin's goal here. And so, yes, I think the more important question is what phase of this war are we in? And we're in that middle phase where the opening gambits of each side failed, and each side still thinks it can win the war if it pushes hard enough. And we haven't yet entered the third phase of the war, where each side has realized they're not going to have total victory and is just trying to position itself, for the eventual ceasefire. And so, to get from phase two to phase three, it means actually continuing to arm and fund the Ukrainians enough that the Russians begin to be exhausted.
And Professor, how do people within the United States feel about Washington sending this aid to Ukraine when the US is perhaps going through uh, one of the worst inflation rates in decades, when inflation is skyrocketing in the country? So how do you think it is playing out domestically?
Quite badly, and it's one of the reasons that Biden's approval ratings are so low, like many leaders around the world, given the economic crisis, which was already bad because of the disruptions coming out of the pandemic, and then worsened by the Ukraine crisis and all the sanctions. But it's surprising. I mean, most Americans, even after they were against the Iraq and Afghan conflicts continuing, understand, I guess, partially because it's in Europe and we have echoes of World War II here, and partially because there's a Cold War echo. That what the U.S. is doing is it's standing up against a foe that has pretensions of disrupting Europe, our main ally, right, and disrupting the global order. And so people get that. They would just wish that it didn't come with such a high cost. And of course, in Europe, the situation's even worse in terms of energy supplies and inflation and everything else. And that will cause some political disruptions in 22 and 23 in Europe.
Professor William Lawrence, it's always a pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you very much.